This is the 16th video in a big series where I'm teaching complete lessons on the top 25 jazz standards for guitar players. There's a link to a playlist of this entire series in the description. The song we are learning today is What Is This Thing Called Love? If you're here just to learn the chords or just the melody or just want to learn the scales to improvise over it, we're covering all this stuff. You can just use the timestamp links in the description to go to whatever specific section that you're looking for. Here's what we're going to cover in this lesson. First, I'll tell you about the song and why it's worth learning. Then I will teach you the melody by clearly demonstrating it on the guitar with notation and tab on the screen. I'll teach you both the easiest chord shapes and the most common chord shapes that you can play for this song, all with chord diagrams on the screen. I'll teach you the scales you can use to improvise over this tune. This is a particularly tricky one, and it's a great opportunity to work on some scales that are less often used. This will all be with demonstrations and scale diagrams on the screen. And every lesson in this series includes a unique piece of advice for how to truly internalize a jazz standard on the guitar, so I will share that. And lastly, I'll give you a guitar listening recommendation for What Is This Thing Called Love? You can access and download the learning resources from this whole lesson series and from my other lessons on YouTube by becoming a premium supporter. There are links in the top of the description to join. You'll get the PDFs of the chord progression, a lead sheet that shows all the chords, the scale breakdown sheet for soloing, the scale diagrams, the chord shape diagrams, and a custom-made backing track with me comping. You'll usually get everything except for the melody on tunes that are not in the public domain, but this tune, What Is This Thing Called Love, is in the public domain, so you will also get the melody lead sheet and the exact tabs for where to play it on the guitar, which is the stuff I'm going to demonstrate in this video. Just use the link in the top of the description to join and support and get all those extra resources, or go to soundguitarlessons.com/join. What Is This Thing Called Love is a jazz standard composed by Cole Porter in 1929 for the Broadway musical Wake Up and Dream. It was a popular show tune during its time, but it became a favorite vehicle for improvisation among jazz musicians, probably due to its seemingly simple but trickier than they look chord changes. And you'll see what I mean when we work on this one. Very beautiful, kind of haunting minor key tune that resolves to a major chord, has some altered scale stuff in there, and really kind of simple looking, but turns out to be a little bit odd. And this tune has been recorded by legends like Billie Holiday, Charlie Parker, Grant Green, and countless others, and it's still a popular choice at jam sessions today. It's also a staple among gypsy jazz guitarists who often play it at blazingly fast tempos. But whether it's played as a relaxed medium swing or as an up-tempo tune to show off chops like in the gypsy jazz world, What Is This Thing Called Love remains one of the most played standards for jazz musicians today. So let's learn the melody. So I'll play you the melody with guitar tab and notation on the screen. I encourage you to practice along with this demonstration as you are working on learning the melody. Here it is at 170 beats per minute. Some melodies just lend themselves so nicely to chord melodies on the guitar based on common chord shapes. I'm going to show you the common comping chord shapes in a little bit in this video, but since we just learned the melody, let me show you the A section as a chord melody with some basic chord shapes. This is a G half diminished chord. That's the first chord in the tune. Okay, so this is fret 10, 11, 10, 11 on the middle four strings. That top note is the melody note, okay? And then a long time ago, I worked out all my inversions of every chord, every 4-note 7th chord especially, or jazz chord. So along these middle strings, for example, here's 3 voicings of that same exact chord. Here's another one up there. So by going through that, I started finding areas where the chord melody kind of just pops out of nowhere. And all of these inversions are something I teach in my course called Jazz Comping Mastery. And then years later, I created a course called Chord Melody Magic. It's kind of the evolution of that from this chord melody realization and expanding on that. So here's this voicing. And then if you go to the inversion of it, this is the same exact chord where now the flat 7 is on the bottom, then the flat 3, here's the flat 5, and here's the root. Okay, so that's fret 8, 8, 6, 8 on the middle 4 strings. So here's that first voicing. Here's that next voicing. Well, that's what the melody's doing. Da, 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 da. Okay, and then I absolutely love this in the tune. This note is the melody, and it's being held during the chord change. And you can make this beautiful chord change from half diminished in this particular inversion with the flat 7 in the bass to dominant 7, flat 9, but first inversion of it. And so a diminished shape, which is just taking what we just played and moving that bottom note down a half step, turns it into C7 flat 9, but without the C, but that's okay. It's like an E diminished 7 shape. So we get this sound. And I'm just playing those bottom 3 notes of the chord, so that's ringing. And it sounds like this comping happening as well as the melody. Okay, and then if you move that up 3 frets, then you get the next melody note, same exact shape. And then if you land on a root position F minor 6, this is root, 5th, 6th, and flat 3 of F minor 6. Difficult chord to get to, but worth working on for sure. Okay, so that's fret 8, 10, 7, 9. That is the melody. That is the first statement of the melody. So now that chord melody comes together purely from having drilled all of those inversion shapes. So I just love how that kind of happened on its own. Let's play it one more time. Okay, so I just thought it would be fun to show you just that. Stay tuned on the channel. Make sure you're subscribed for more chord melody lessons in the future. I'll probably do a whole arrangement of this tune with that methodology in a future lesson. Before I just show you the chord shapes on the guitar with the diagrams on the screen, let's look at the full chord progression here for a second. This is the lead sheet here. We have a minor 2-5-1. It's always a little odd feeling to do a minor 2-5-1 into a minor 6 chord, but it's very common. And that minor 6 chord is often used as a minor tonic. We saw that, well, we didn't do an Autumn Leaves version that uses the minor 6, but it's very often played with minor 6 as the tonic minor chord. The first lesson in this series, we did Autumn Leaves, and I chose to do it as minor 7. But the minor 6 is very common. We saw it in several other tunes in this series. And so that's that minor 2-5-1 there. And then we have a minor 2-5 and kind of a surprise cadence resolution to a major chord instead of a minor chord. So that minor 2, that's the second chord in C minor. And then we have a 5, and instead of G7 flat 9 or G7 flat 13, which are indicating the exact same chord, I've said that earlier in the series as well, G7 alt is here, and this is a whole different ballgame. G7 alt, it's just crunchier, it's different. An alt chord means that it has the root, of course, because the root is always the root. It has the 3rd and it has the 7, because those are the guide tones. You can't mess with those. They change the quality completely. But everything else is messed up and mangled. So it doesn't have a natural 9. It has a flat 9 and a sharp 9. It doesn't have a natural 5. It has a flat 5 and a sharp 5. So it's totally just as dissonant as you can make a dominant 7th chord. So, of course, you can play an alt chord, a dominant 7 alt chord, anytime there's a dominant 7 chord in any tune, you can just make it more dissonant and crunchy and resolve to wherever it's going anytime. So people are doing that often, and you might see a lead sheet or hear a version of this where the alt is not being played here, and instead it's the kind of typical flat 9 minor 2-5-1 situation, but the alt is very much the interpretation that I think stays more true to the song. And this is great for us because we haven't had experience with this yet, even if you've been following along every video in this series, which awesome if you have been. But we need some practice with this alt chord. So we're going to get to that with the scales practice section coming up. But it's just good to acknowledge, what does that alt chord mean? And the shape for it can look similar to other chords, but the interpretation is different. If you're playing a sharp 5 in an alt chord, it's the sharp 5. If you're playing the flat 13 in a G7 flat 13 chord, that same exact note is actually flat 13. Don't worry about that right now, just pointing out kind of the anatomy of that chord. Okay, then we just have a typical, here's what I was talking about, the flat 9, which means flat 13 is also in it. So typical minor 2-5-1 like we had up there. Okay, then we have that same thing repeated. Okay, so that's happening twice. And then a nice, just normal major key 2-5-1 in the key of B flat major. Very stark kind of transition here from the C major resolution to just suddenly changing to a minor chord, and that becomes the 2-5-1 there. And then we get this fun, spicy dominant 7th chord with a sharp 11 here. And this is sharp 11 because of where it is placed in the key. So it is on the flat 6 of C major. Okay, so this is going flat 6 to 5, half step down to 5. So instead of like a 2-5 like we had up here, like D to G, we have A flat, half step above G, moving down, okay? And because of that positioning, it just happens to mean that it has a sharp 11 in it. You don't have to worry about why right now, but it's great practice for us, especially when we get to the scales work, that it has a particular scale we need to use on it. So really crunchy. This is really difficult to improvise over this stuff. Really hard, even though this feels like a simpler tune than some of the others, and it's not as maybe dense, but it's tricky. It's a little awkward, and really, really great to practice, especially because of this alt chord and the scale we need to use for that. So then we just have our repeated stuff there. So those are my comments for the chord progression, and let's just learn the shapes themselves, and I'll demonstrate it on the guitar. Now I'll play you 2 different versions of the chord shapes for this tune. I'll play each chord once, each time the chord changes, and I'll show you the chord shape diagrams on the screen as I play. I encourage you to practice along with these demonstrations as you're working on getting the chords down. First, I will play you the chords using the simplest chord shape possible. These are often called shell voicings. They just have 3 notes, the root, the 3rd, and the 7th, or the root, the 3rd, and the 6th. And these are widely used in jazz, and they sound great. They sound a little more minimal. Here is that demonstration at 170 beats per minute. Now I'll play you the more common jazz guitar chord shapes for What Is This Thing Called Love. These have an extra note in them, and they fill out the sound a little more, especially with these altered chords and chords with extensions. It's going to add a lot more crunchiness to it. Here's that demonstration, also at 170 beats per minute. Next, I'll show you the scales you need to be able to improvise and solo over What Is This Thing Called Love. I'll demonstrate and show diagrams of all the scales in one position, overlapping in roughly the 5th fret position on the fretboard. And first, we'll do an overview with a scale sheet to show what scales the chords come from. And I'll show you all the scales and demonstrate improvising with them. Okay, here's the scale sheet that shows what scale each chord comes from. Our minor 2-5 always comes from the harmonic minor scale of the key that it's resolving to. So the 2 and the 5 is resolving to F. F harmonic minor is the scale that both of these chords come from. And that is just coming up almost in every lesson in this series. And then my favorite go-to default minor 6 chord scale is melodic minor. The minor 6 chord also exists in a Dorian scale, so F Dorian. But when it's the tonic chord resolving from a 2-5-1, it feels more appropriate to me, and I hear it more often as the way people are improvising over minor 6 chords, that it really is a melodic minor sound, which is more of a tonic sound, more of a home-based sound, because it has a major 7. It has a major 6, but it also has a major 7. So it's like a major chord with a minor 3rd is kind of what that feeling is like, which makes sense as a resolution chord. The Dorian doesn't feel as much like it has arrived somewhere. It feels a little more nebulous. Can also sound great though, so feel free to use other options. I just always like to have one option I get good at first when working through a tune. So now we have our G altered here, which we want to use the altered scale for this. Okay, the altered scale is the 7th mode of a melodic minor scale. I'm going to show you all the scale shape diagrams and everything like that, so you can just work on it with the fretboard, which is the way to get it down. So if you ever hear something, side note here, if you ever hear something and it goes over your head, the thing that allows you to understand it is the actual practicing, right? Applying it on the guitar is always I couldn't talk about or understand any of this stuff if it wasn't that sitting around and solving the puzzle of it on the fretboard itself, and then gaining an understanding of how that all makes sense. So an altered scale is a melodic minor scale that's up a half step. A lot of people just think of it that way. So what's the note that is a half step above G? It's A flat. So the A flat melodic minor scale is the G altered scale, is the scale you can play over this. So does the D half diminished also come from that same altered scale? Actually, no, it does not. There are clashing notes here, but this is the homework that I've done for us, really investigated deeply what I think our go-to default option should be. This whole thing, especially at a fast tempo, and this tune is often played at fast-ish tempos, even at 170, which is the tempo that I'm doing in this lesson. This is moving along just as a harmonic moment to cause tension to resolve to this. And you're going to be totally fine using the altered scale here also. Do you want to get it more accurate eventually? Absolutely, you can do that. You can outline this with some chord tones and then play altered scale here. You can treat this as a scale. This is the 7th mode of a major scale. So you could play an E flat major scale here for a moment, but it's going to be so fast. Don't worry about all that stuff. A big part of what I'm trying to help you with is not getting hung up on those kinds of details until you can just play through the whole thing. Then later get hung up on those details and have fun doing it, but knowing that if someone called the tune right now, you could play through it. And no one at all is ever going to notice and be like, hey, you played a clashing note there because you played No, it's going to sound awesome. In fact, a lot of the sophisticated stuff that people are wanting to work towards is superimposing harmonies, superimposing scales and arpeggios that sound a little out and off on purpose, right? That sound a little more modern or crunchy or angular or whatever way you want to describe it. So this outness here, where there's a couple notes in this scale G altered that don't line up with this chord, sounds fantastic because it's going right into G altered. And then if you resolve here to C major, then you are the hero. You have arrived at the goal line. So really amazing opportunity to practice and work on the G altered scale with both of those. Okay. If you're just craving for being a little more accurate on this, then I would say phase 2 is to play chord tones of this one, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7 are the chord tones of that, and then altered scale here, and then land on that. Okay, so a lot of times I'll show exactly the scale everything comes from, and then I'll also show a simplified scales sheet that says we can ignore a lot of that stuff. Well, here we're jumping right to the ignoring because it is the better option for us to get more musical more quickly. Okay, so now we have just a 2-5-1 in B flat major. So that's all B flat major. I love when there's all of this difficult, more dissonant sounding stuff, and then we suddenly have just a string of a normal major key 2-5-1. One of my favorite things to do is to do melodic patterns there. Any kind of melodic pattern, which is going through the scale in a sequence of notes and repeating that through the scale, is going to just sound fantastic there. It's going to sound like you're really in that key center. You're in B flat major there. Okay, then we move on to here. This is that A flat dominant 7 chord with a sharp 11. Well, A flat Lydian dominant is the technical term mode or scale there. It's the same thing as E flat melodic minor. So I hope what we're learning here and realizing, and if you've watched other videos in the series, which you should if you're into this kind of stuff, melodic minor does come up relatively frequently. And so drilling just all the 5 shapes and forms of melodic minor on the guitar and being able to do that in that one position is going to just be huge for your playing. So then this doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, Lydian dominant, melodic minor, how is it, where is it? Well, great. Maybe take a step back, maybe take a month or two and just work on the melodic minor scale forms themselves. There's 5 of them. And I have them in my printable parent scales PDF. You can get that for free. There's a link in the description, or go to soundguitarlessons.com/scales. Has all the scales you need, including all the melodic minor scales. And then all these modes, like the altered scale, comes from melodic minor, and Lydian dominant comes from melodic minor. So does not matter how you think of it. You don't have to think A flat as the root. You can think E flat melodic minor, or you can think of A flat. You can think of the mode. Doesn't matter. It's a collection of notes you're trying to be melodic with. You can find your own way to do that. Here we have G altered. So yep, it's that altered scale again. And then this stuff all repeats from earlier, exactly the same as up there. So it's sneaky and a little more difficult than it seems like it should be. I learned this tune a long time ago as kind of a beginner level tune and still couldn't figure out how to truly play over it well for years and years after that. And I realized, okay, it's a little more advanced than it seems on the surface. So let me show you those scales with scale diagrams and then demonstrate improvising with them. I'll play all of these scales as just a collection of notes. Sometimes I play the root to the root of the scale root to get the sound of the scale or the mode. Sometimes I just play a collection of notes. In the end, do it however you want that works for you, to realize that the collection of notes is just something you're trying to be melodic with. Doesn't matter how you see it compared to someone else. If you're able to use those notes and be melodic with it, you're doing it. Here's F harmonic minor. Here is F melodic minor. One note different, and yet it feels completely different. Like I can't say, oh, I'm going to move one note. If I know this, then I'll know that. But it just looks and feels like a totally different scale. So that's how it's always going to be with scales and modes. Each one is truly its own beast. Here is G altered scale, or you can think of it as A flat melodic minor. Here is the C major scale. Here is A flat Lydian dominant, or you can think of it as E flat melodic minor. And those are all the scales from the sheet. Here is the B flat major scale. Now I will use exactly those scales in exactly this position to improvise over the whole progression of What Is This Thing Called Love, just as a demonstration. time for the part of the video where I give you an internalization tip. These are your musicianship skill practice items to truly enhance your overall musical fitness. You can apply these to any tune. I'm just giving one in each of the lessons in the series. This is so we can know the piece of music so much better than just, say, being able to play it, just knowing where the frets are supposed to be pressed and stuff like that. The tip for today is to, at some point, perform the piece of music that you're trying to internalize. This will put a fire under you like nothing else, and anyone who performs will agree. I actually consider recording as part of this because a recording is you're recording a performance of it. So if that's what you want to do, great. Just don't think of it as an editing project, or you're obviously not manipulating it with MIDI or anything, like an actual, you are recording yourself playing for it. That is a performance. You're capturing a performance. So anything counts. Have some friends over to play. What will happen just when you are practicing for this is that you will hear things and notice things that you never noticed before, because you're suddenly heightened in paying attention to, wow, somebody else might hear this or is going to hear this, and now the standards are higher. You're just instantly a better musician because of that. And then you're going to kind of practice harder and work through the difficulties. And then you're going to absorb this piece of music better and retain it longer and all of that. So whatever that is to you, if you jam session, record it and share it with someone, even just on your phone, or record a video, or do an open mic, or invite some friends over to play, or just perform it for someone in your house. All of those things count. You can decide for yourself. But I have a checklist of things that I always try to do on every piece of music that I want to know very well. And all of these internalization tips are on there. Can I play the melody in all these different places? Can I play the chords and sing through every key? Can I manipulate it in this way or that way? And performing it at some point, or recording it, or both, is definitely on that list. So keep that in mind for the music that you want to know better than anything else. That goes on your list for it, performing it. That's your internalization tip for this video. I'll give you my what is this thing called love guitar listening recommendation in 1 second. But first, you can access and download the learning resources from this whole lesson series and from my other lessons on YouTube by becoming a premium supporter of the channel. You will get the PDFs of the chord progression and the lead sheet for this song. I can't give the melody away if the song is not in public domain, but this song is in public domain. So you get the lead sheet melody, the tabs for exactly where I recommend playing it on the guitar. For all the tunes, you'll get the scale breakdown sheets that show what scale to play. That's probably the most valuable thing, I think. The scale diagrams in that one position for exactly where to work on it. The chord shape diagrams for the simple chords and the common chords, and a custom-made backing track with me comping. And those are just the lessons from this series. I also have downloads, resources, PDFs, stuff like that for other lessons as well, because I put out a lesson every single Tuesday. Just use the link in the top of the description to join and support the channel and get all of those extra resources, or go to soundguitarlessons.com/join. And I mentioned earlier that you can download my printable parent scales PDF if you just want to work on a bunch of your scales, because I said, hey, you got to learn your melodic minor scales, or just drill the 5 scale forms in various keys along the fretboard. Great, I have all the scales you need, all the parent scales written out, just crystal clear diagrams that you can practice from. So if you don't have that yet, you can go to soundguitarlessons.com/scales, or use the link in the description to get that as well, totally for free. If you want a jazz guitar listening recommendation for what is this thing called love, I recommend the Jimmy Rainey Quartet version on the album called Rainey 81. There's a link to a playlist of all my listening recommendations for this series in the description. Make sure you listen to that, or some other version that you really just absorb and listen to on repeat. It'll help a lot when you are working on a tune. And make sure you're subscribed, because I can't wait to see you in my next lesson in this series, where we are going to do song number 17 of the top 25 jazz standards for guitar players. And that one is going to be Someday My Prince Will Come. Hit that like button and leave a comment if you liked this lesson. It really makes a difference. It really helps other people find the videos and reach their guitar goals from the lessons. Check out the description for all the links I've mentioned and for how you can support the channel. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching. Take care and happy practicing.